Now, promise you won't overdo it when we get to the bowling alley, Grandpa.
Oh, I'll take it easy, Georgie.
It was 1962, and America was looking up. Sputnik had already crossed the sky. The space race was on, and on a Sunday night in September, a cartoon family floated onto television screens in a bubble-top flying car and promised everyone watching that the future was going to be just fine. This is the entire story of the Jetsons, the family in the sky. The Jetsons are, at their core, a sitcom family, and that is entirely the point. George Jetson is 40 years old, works a desk job at Spacely Space Sprockets.
Shall I wake up Mom?
No. Let her sleep for a while. I'll surprise her, and I'll get the breakfast.
And worries constantly about the same things middle-class American men in 1962 worried about: keeping his boss happy, keeping his family comfortable, and finding a few minutes of peace somewhere in between. George O'Hanlon, who voiced him, once described the character plainly: George is an average man who has trouble with his boss and problems with his kids. The only difference is that he lives in the next century. That description is accurate and also the entire joke, and the show never tires of it. Jane Jetson is 33 years old, a homemaker, devoted to her family, and enthusiastically devoted to shopping. She is warm, sensible, and frequently the most competent person in any scene she shares with George.
A dream girl walking alone.
Which she handles with good-natured patience rather than exasperation. Penny Singleton, who voiced Jane, had spent 14 years playing Blondie in a series of popular films based on the comic strip. The parallel was deliberate. George Jetson was in many ways a futuristic Dagwood Bumstead, a thin, long-nosed, well-meaning man forever caught between a demanding boss and a domestic life. He slightly underestimates his ability to manage. Their children split the classic sitcom archetypes neatly. Judy is a teenager with a ponytail of silver-white hair, a passion for music and fashion, and all the attendant dramatics of someone for whom everything is either wonderful or catastrophic with very little in between. Janet Waldo voiced her and brought a genuine sweetness to the character beneath the teenage energy.
You have to admit it's awfully sweet, Mother. Imagine they saw each other only once.
Elroy is the younger sibling, intellectually precocious, enthusiastic about science, and still young enough to find wonder in things that adults have stopped noticing. Dawes Butler voiced him with a bright-eyed earnestness that made the character easy to like. Then there is Astro, the family dog, who speaks in mumbled, half-intelligible sentences where the letter R precedes most consonants. Roo-row. Right, Riorge. Astro was voiced by Don Messick, who would later voice Scooby-Doo using essentially the same speech pattern. And the lineage between the two characters is direct and intentional. Both dogs represent the same thing: chaos, affection, and the specific quality of warmth that only a large, enthusiastic animal can provide to a household that sometimes forgets to slow down. And then there is Rosie, the robot maid. Rosie only appeared in a handful of episodes during the original 1962 season, but she made an impression that far exceeded her screen time. She was voiced in the original run by Jean Vander Pill, who also voiced Wilma Flintstone. Rosie is opinionated, practical, and affectionate in the way that a good housekeeper who has been with a family long enough to feel like family tends to be. She does not merely clean, she comments, she cares. And in a show full of gadgets that exist to reduce human effort, Rosie is the one gadget that actually has a personality. The Jetsons live in the Skypad apartments. George commutes to work in an aerocar that looks like a small flying saucer with a clear bubble canopy.
Us for it.
We'll be lucky if he gives us a bag to carry the pieces home in.
He pushes a button to drive it. His workday, by the era's standards, is practically utopian. 1 hour a day, 2 days a week. and yet he still manages to find it exhausting. His boss, Cosmo G. Spacely, is the owner of Spacely Space Sprockets, and he is a very specific type of character who had been refined in comedy for decades before the Jetsons gave him a space-age iteration. He is small, loud, perpetually irritated, and given to firing George at the slightest provocation, which makes the moments when he needs something from George into brief exercises in reluctant civility. Mel Blanc voiced Spacely, the same Mel Blanc who voiced Bugs Bunny and Barney Rubble and Daffy Duck.
Did you hear that? Sounds like a broken down inner space stereo.
And brought to him a compressed, explosive energy that made even brief scenes crackle. Spacely's business rival is H.G. Cogswell, owner of Cogswell Cogs, and their competition gives several episodes their basic tension. Spacely needs something, George has to provide it, and everything that can go wrong does. The formula was consistent and it was effective. The Jetsons was the Flintstones in a spacesuit. Same structure, same rhythm, same essential warmth. And audiences who had already accepted Fred and Wilma found the parallel easy and enjoyable. What happened every week? The 24 episodes of the original season followed the logic of the domestic sitcom with total fidelity. The future setting provided the gadgets. The story that played out around those gadgets was pure 1960s American family life.
That's when you're a student driver. How far is the planet Bevdale, Mom?
The very first episode introduced Rosie and established the show's basic approach immediately. The Jetsons decide to hire a robot maid because even in 2062, the machinery of a household needs someone to manage it. They get Rosie, who is an older model, slightly worn, and clearly not the sleek new robot Jane had in mind. And yet Rosie immediately demonstrates that character is worth more than specifications, and the family keeps her. 22 minutes, one gentle lesson about the difference between surface value and actual value, wrapped in jokes about futuristic technology. A second episode followed Judy as she tried to win a contest offering a date with a rock star named Jet Screamer. The song written for that episode, a deliberately absurdist piece of science fiction nonsense called Eep Op Orca Ah.
Robot shopping center. As you can see, the mechanic told mouse.
Credited to Hoyt Curtin, William Hanna, and Joseph Barbera, became a small piece of Jetsons lore, the show's version of what teenage pop culture would look like a century from now. The space car episode sent George and Jane car shopping, a premise that barely needs a futuristic setting to be relatable, and found them accidentally entangled with criminals who wanted the vehicle they'd bought. Astro came home in one episode, in a story that followed the exact shape of every family narrative about a child who brings home a pet the father insists they don't need, George resisting, Elroy attached, the dog proving himself, the father relenting. The setting was Orbit City. The story was every American suburb. George's workplace drama extended beyond his relationship with Spacely.
Wrong. You don't know your mother. She'll appreciate it, because when you tell someone the truth...
A recurring device involved Uniblab, an office robot installed at Spacely Space Sprockets, who was smarter than George and eager to prove it. Uniblab was the show's version of the office computer, the machine that was supposed to make work more efficient and instead created new layers of indignity for the humans working alongside it. George eventually outwits it, because the show required him to, but not before it had demonstrated exactly the kind of anxiety that many Americans in 1962 were beginning to feel about automation in the workplace. The fear that the machine might do the job better and the boss might notice. Another episode sent George and Elroy on a camping trip with Elroy's scout troop, a narrative device that required taking the family out of the Orbit City apartments.
I got the works.
So did I.
Something tells me Dad didn't get the raise.
And into a wilderness that was still somehow full of futuristic complications. The father-son dynamic in those outdoor episodes had a genuine sweetness to it. George out of his element, Elroy proud of his skills. Both of them finding their way to each other across the generational gap that sitcom writing has always understood is both real and bridgeable. What the show did, consistently and without much fanfare, was take anxieties that were genuinely present in early 1960s American life and reframe them through future technology. Labor-saving devices that don't quite work. Machines that do too much and somehow create more inconvenience than they resolve. The persistent gap between what technology promises and what it actually delivers.
Hey, young lady, don't get any fancy romantic ideas.
George's work life, despite the one-hour days, is full of the same bureaucratic frustrations that workers in 1962 would have recognized immediately. His boss is unreasonable. The machinery breaks down. The memo went to the wrong department. The future, the Jetsons kept suggesting, was going to look very different and feel very much the same. The voice cast and the world they built. The Jetsons was not a show that became beloved because of narrative complexity or emotional ambition. It was a show that became beloved because of warmth. Hanna-Barbera assembled a voice cast that was extraordinarily capable. A collection of radio veterans, film character actors, and specialist voice performers who understood how to make characters feel immediate, even in limited animation.
We go any faster, Daddy? It's so boring.
I'm hungry.
Ah, the joys of family life.
George O'Hanlon, who had spent years playing everyman figures in Joe McDoke's film shorts for Warner Brothers, brought to George Jetson a specific quality of well-intentioned bafflement that made him sympathetic even when he was being foolish. He had actually auditioned for the role of Fred Flintstone years earlier, losing out to Alan Reed. And when it came time to cast the Jetsons, Hanna-Barbera remembered him. The fit was obvious. Penny Singleton brought warmth and intelligence to Jane without letting the character become merely domestic. She had played the comic strip character Blondie in 28 films between 1938 and 1950, and everything she had learned about making a homemaker feel fully human went into Jane Jetson. Mel Blanc was Mel Blanc, a genius of vocal comedy who could communicate an entire personality in a single syllable of outrage.
Bye.
What a drag. That Spacely is worse than Scrooge.
And who made Mr. Spacely into something genuinely funny rather than merely irritating. The limited animation style that Hanna-Barbera had developed, fewer frames per second, characters placed against static or looping backgrounds, kept costs manageable, while the writers put most of the show's energy into the jokes and the situations. The Googie-style architecture of Orbit City, with its curved surfaces and floating platforms and atomic age aesthetic, gave the visual designers a framework that still looks of a specific and appealing moment in design history. It is recognizably mid-century American in the same way that a drive-in movie theater or a tail-finned automobile is recognizably mid-century American.
The multi-directional microspeed jets with the gyroscope light sensors.
Bound to its era, and therefore somehow timeless. The gadgets were drawn from books and articles about futurism that Hanna-Barbera had been studying during development. One title in particular, a book called 1975 and the Changes to Come, was reportedly influential. The show's designers took predictions that were being made seriously by scientists and engineers and ran them through the cartoon machine until they came out funny. The food machine that produces a complete meal at the push of a button. The treadmill that can be set to run you anywhere in the city. The video phone that shows your face before you've had a chance to compose yourself. The automatic closet that dresses you whether you're ready or not. What is striking, from the distance of more than 60 years, is how many of these things exist now in some form.
Guy, just remember whose taxes are paying for your programming.
Whatever you broke, Astro, we better fix it.
Video calling, robotic household assistants, automated vehicles, wearable technology, smart home systems. The Jetsons did not invent any of it. The underlying ideas were in circulation before the show aired, but it collected all of those predictions into a single vivid image and made them feel pleasant rather than threatening, which was its own significant contribution to how Americans thought about the technological future. One season, and then something unexpected. The Jetsons ran in prime time for one season, 24 episodes, from September 23, 1962 through March 17, 1963. By any conventional measure, this was a failure. The ratings against Disney and Dennis the Menace were not good enough to justify the cost.
But lately, when the Sandman heads for my bed, he gets sandbagged.
A BC pulled it from the Sunday night schedule. The executives moved on. It was, on paper, just another canceled show that hadn't found its audience. But then something happened that nobody had particularly planned for. A BC moved the show to Saturday morning reruns for the 1963 to 1964 season, and children found it. Saturday morning was a different ecosystem from prime time. Prime time needed to pull in a broad adult audience competing for attention against everything else on the dial. Saturday morning was speaking to children, and children responded to the Jetsons with something close to devotion. The show ran on Saturday mornings, cycling through CBS, then NBC, then back again, for nearly 2 decades.
You're right, Elroy. Mr. Cogswell, and unemployment, here I come.
Reaching generation after generation of children who had not been alive when it originally aired. Each new cohort of Saturday morning kids encountered the Jetson family as if they were new, which in a real sense they were. There were only 24 episodes. They played them over and over again. It did not matter. By the early 1980s, the Jetsons had become one of the most recognized animated families in American television history, despite having been in production for a single season 20 years earlier. Hanna-Barbera recognized what they had. In 1984, they announced a revival. New episodes, same characters, same voice cast, produced for syndication and aimed at the Saturday morning market that had kept the original alive.
Hairdresser gets fixed overnight, and someone's been fooling around with my auto barber.
The Return to Orbit City. The revival premiered in September 1985. 41 new episodes aired over the next 2 years, with the original 24 bundled alongside them. The same voice cast returned. George O'Hanlon, Penny Singleton, Janet Waldo, Dawes Butler, Don Messick, Jean Vanderpyle, Mel Blanc, now 20 years older, reuniting for a show whose audience had been replaced by new children who were discovering it for the first time. The tone shifted slightly in the revival. The original 1962 episodes were, essentially, 1950s sitcom plots in a futuristic costume. The 1985 episodes leaned more heavily into science fiction territory, incorporating stranger plots and more fantastical premises.
Job is breaking up concrete with this 110-pound jackhammer.
HS players, pocket calculators, slipping them into the futuristic world without comment, and it added a new character, Orbity, a small alien creature that the family adopts in the first revival episode. Orbity is a polarizing figure among the show's fans, in the way that late additions to established casts tend to be polarizing. He changes color with his emotions. He can spring to great heights on his coil-like legs. He meant well. 10 additional episodes were produced in 1987 as a third season batch. By the time the revival concluded, the total episode count had reached 75. Still a modest number by the standards of any long-running animated series, but more than enough to fill out a syndication package. In 1990, Jetsons.
The name's J Spaceport Glitch, Mr. Jetson. I'm your lawyer.
How do you do?
The movie arrived in theaters, a feature-length animated film produced by Hanna-Barbera and released by Universal Pictures. The production was marked by tragedy. George O'Hanlon suffered a stroke during recording and died on February 11, 1989, having just finished his dialogue. Mel Blanc, who had voiced Mr. Spacely across the entire run of the show, died on July 10, 1989. Both men were honored in the film's dedication. Jeff Bergman stepped in to complete the vocal work for both characters. Janet Waldo, who had voiced Judy across the entire run of the series, recorded her dialogue in full and was then replaced by Tiffany, the pop singer who had just had a major hit with her version of I Think We're Alone Now, in a decision that generated significant criticism from the voice acting community and from fans of the original series.
I really want a job.
Well, in order to get you a job, I have to know what you're interested in.
The film performed modestly and received mixed reviews, but it served as a kind of closing ceremony for the original production era of the show. The Jetson family had taken their bow. What the Jetsons actually said. The Jetsons was not, in any obvious way, a show that was trying to make a point. It was trying to be funny, and it usually was. But underneath the jokes and the flying cars and the push-button kitchens, there was something being said about the relationship between Americans and the future they were being promised. The early 1960s were full of utopian technological promises. Scientists and corporations and government officials were telling the public that automation would free workers from drudgery.
Fit, so I could work even faster.
Well, you couldn't be working any slower. You're falling behind, Jetson.
That machines would take over the unpleasant parts of life and leave humans free to pursue happiness. The Jetsons inhabited exactly that world, and then made clear, episode after episode, that the problems had simply changed form rather than disappeared. George's automated job was still exhausting. The food machine still produced meals that weren't quite right. The flying car was still a source of anxiety. The boss was still unreasonable. The children still had problems that technology couldn't solve. This was not cynicism. The show was too cheerful to be cynical, but it was honest in its own lightweight way. The future would be different, and people would still be people inside it. That is, if you think about it,
Yes, I know.
a genuinely comforting message. It meant that the strangeness of what was coming would be manageable, that a family could find a way to be ordinary in any century. For an audience that was being told simultaneously that the Soviets might bomb them from orbit and that personal jetpacks were 20 years away, the Jetsons' Orbit City offered something valuable, a future that was specifically unthreatening. Not because the problems had been solved, but because the problems were recognizable. They were the same problems. They just came with better gadgets. What was left behind? The Jetsons ran for one season in 1962 and was canceled. It ran again in 1985 and ran out of steam by 1987. Its theatrical film came and went in 1990. By any conventional television metric, it is a minor property.
Ow! I'm pulling your robots offline, Mr. Spacely.
A short-lived series that found its second and third lives in reruns rather than in original production. And yet, it remains one of the most immediately recognizable animated properties in American cultural history. The Skypad apartments, the bubble-top Aerocar, Rosie trundling through the kitchen, Astro's half-intelligible proclamations, George on the walkway at the end of the credits, calling out to Jane while Astro drags him helplessly forward on the treadmill, the same little loop playing over and over while the credits roll. A perfect encapsulation of a show about a future where everything is automated and still somehow exhausting. The theme song by Hoyt Curtin, which became an actual pop chart hit when it was re-released in 1986.
I've got to catch that dentist before he leaves town.
And which can still stop people mid-conversation when it comes on a radio somewhere. A live-action film adaptation has been in development for years, most recently reported in 2025 with director Colin Trevorrow attached and Jim Carrey in talks. The characters have appeared in commercials, in crossovers, in video games, in theme park attractions. The word Jetsons functions as cultural shorthand. When a new technology looks particularly futuristic, when a design is particularly of the space age moment, someone calls it like something out of the Jetsons, and everyone in the room knows exactly what they mean. The show aired at a moment when America's relationship with the future was genuinely complicated. Part excitement, part dread, part uncertainty about whether the changes coming were going to serve ordinary people or simply reorganize their difficulties.
And try to marry into big money. Have fun. Bye-bye.
The Jetsons answered that anxiety with a family that was neither heroic nor exceptional, just recognizably human, making the best of whatever century they'd been placed in. George pushed his button. Jane managed the household. The kids grew up. The dog got into trouble. The boss threatened to fire someone. 24 episodes produced over a few months in 1962 managed to create an image of the future so specific and so warm that it has outlasted almost everything else from that moment. Not because it was right about what the future would look like. It wasn't, really. But because it was right about what people wanted the future to feel like. Safe, funny, a little ridiculous, recognizably human.
Does that answer your question? I'm using it to tape Petunia when she wins first prize again at the show.
That is the entire story of the Jetsons. From a Sunday night in September 1962 to a family that is still floating above the clouds, decades later, in a show that was supposed to be over after one season and never really ended. If this brought back something you haven't thought about in a while, or if you're discovering it for the first time, hit the like button and subscribe. There's a lot more story worth telling right here. See you next time.